Bang! What is up, folks, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Monday, November 8th, and how about that for an exciting weekend, folks? I see Bob in the chat here in the comments. Nice Sunday night for a change, and I would agree, Bob. Typically we see some profit taking on Sundays. Not this week. We saw ETH make a new all-time high. Bitcoin continue to rip up. Assets like AVAX make some incredibly strong moves. Love to see that on the weekend. Very nice change of pace. So we'll talk about that and a whole lot more, give you guys an outlook for the week. But before we dive into things, CJ, Doc 65K, how are you gents doing today?
Well, as the name implies, I'm doing pretty well. I was kind of chuckling over the weekend, as I bet many of us were, about Elon Musk tweeting out about Tesla. And just for those of you who don't know, Elon was doing a Twitter poll where he got over 3 million votes. And it was a poll basically asking, should I sell 10% of my Tesla to pay for this billionaire's tax? Because the proposed billionaire's tax, I can make it quick and easy, is a tax on unrealized gains. In other words, which would extend to things like crypto, of course. So if you bought it at $500 and now it's at 65,000 and you had enough to qualify for that billionaire's tax, God bless you, then they would say that, well, we want, a tax on that unrealized gain. You haven't sold any, but we want a tax on it, which is the most ridiculous thing. And I think that's what Elon is pointing to, is how ridiculous that is. Because if you've not sold, or if you've shorted something and not covered it, you haven't got a gain. And if you bought something and it ran to the upside and you haven't sold it, you haven't got a gain. You have an unrealized gain. That's not spendable money. Not in the traditional sense at all. I could help you find ways to spend that, but that's not spendable, unrealized gain. So Elon, I think, was pointing to the ludicrous nature of such a tax by saying, well, if I and all of the other billionaires then have to sell their stock, who am I going to hurt? You. I'm going to hurt all the people that own my stock. That's what you're making me do if you do this, because I have to pay the tax if that passed into law. It has not yet. But if it passed into law, he would have to sell or get money from somewhere to pay the tax that he's due. And in the case of Bezos and Gates and a host of others, this would be quite a large tax bill every year, which then again begs to the question, well, why wouldn't you just sell it then and realize the gain? At least it's a long-term capital gain, but you have to pay, in addition to the capital gain, the unrealized gain on the rest of your shares. So this would be something that would put significant pressure on some of the biggest stocks out there. Just look at who the holders are of your favorite stock. And it is something, ultimately, if it passed into law, that would affect Bitcoin and all these cryptos as well. I'm sure none of us are crying big crocodile tears for billionaires that might have to pay an unrealized gain. But trust me, folks, if they have to pay it, it would be a matter of time. You could count the seconds before the rest of us would have to pay on unrealized gains as well. So this is something that is pretty ugly. And Mr. Musk was just causing attention to be drawn to it. And by doing what he did, his stock traded down about 5% like that on the opening, from people fearing, well, if Elon's going to sell his shares, what's that going to do? Anyway, other than that, I'm fine.
I'm always interested to hear what the unrealized losses then become. Do they just give you back money then? Even if do they cover half your position, even if you make a bad trade? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, could you just take your unrealized losses and stack them against your unrealized gains?
Anyways, yeah, tremendous price action in Bitcoin. Why don't we take a look at the charts, because we have hit some critical levels and finally broken out. But first, let's go to the weekly chart, because we had the highest weekly close in Bitcoin's lifetime just last night at approximately 65K. So that bodes well. I think it's great for potential continuation into new all-time highs. I think you guys have heard me talk a lot about how one of my favorite trading setups is buying, a breakout of all-time highs when we have some really good bullish momentum building within the trend. A lot of interesting stuff to say about Bitcoin dominance as well, but I'm going to save that for a little bit later. If we look at the shorter term time frame on the daily, one thing that we had highlighted last week and on Friday's cocktail hour was this symmetrical triangle and the potential for it to break in one direction or another. Once that we saw we had a breakout and close above this symmetrical triangle, that was something we had mentioned in the chat kind of late last night at around 64K. I had bought some more Bitcoin and added to that position. I really like that we're seeing continued convergence within the oscillators. You're seeing this potential bullish crossover in the MACD, and you're closing above a critical Fibonacci support level at 63K, which was the previous all-time high back in April. So a lot of bullish things coming together here for the trend. And something that I thought was very interesting in terms of Glassnode data and exchange net position change is that in the last 4 months, just over 200,000 Bitcoins have been moved off of exchanges, according to Glassnode. That's about 12.5 billion at current prices. And so I think it's really interesting to see this just regime of outflows illustrating a broader shift in the dynamics for the Bitcoin market being extraordinarily bullish. And I think this is actually a really interesting argument for why this will be the last cycle. And I'm not saying that we won't experience another 50 to 60% drawdown at a certain time just because of Bitcoin's implied volatility. I do think we'll see that. Nonetheless, the concept of a 4-year cycle may be ending because a lot of these on-chain metrics really pointing to the lack of accumulation and actually distribution that we had throughout the 2016 and 2017 bull market. But now we just have so many new whales and institutions coming into the market. They're really setting a floor for us that I think is much higher. And until we see distribution like what we saw at our recent peak, right, like that, I'm not particularly concerned about bearish downside price action. I think we have a lot of upside ahead of us, and I think something that's really interesting, I think Plan B was calling for 98K by the end of November, and based on the scarcity and the supply shock of things that we're seeing, I'm not going to put that out of the realm of possibility. I do think it has definitely the potential, but what are you guys thinking as well?
Monty?
Yeah, CJ, I think that was a great explanation. And, you talked about supply shock there. I think that is definitely a driving factor in this market. I agree with you. I think we will eventually see those drawdowns that we typically see at the end of market cycles. But based on what we're seeing now from the on-chain metrics, it's implying that we are still a long way off from that point in time. So I think we're setting up for a very nice bullish month here in November. I think you showing those the monthly time frame, I think, looks very, very bullish there. We are on a breakout, the verge of a breakout here. Same with the weekly time frame as well. And whenever you have, the alts making the sort of moves that we're seeing now, I think, it really paints a picture that we are entering into that parabolic part of the market cycle. And right now, based on what we're seeing on chain, we're seeing long-term holders lock away Bitcoin. We're seeing Bitcoin flow off of exchanges, like CJ just pointed out. Until we start to see that change, I think you want to be long in pretty much, any crypto asset you can find on Voyager at this point. But I want to do a deeper dive into Ethereum, because ETH has been absolutely on fire this weekend, and it also has dictated a lot of the price action in some of the downstream alts as well. CJ, you talked about how you love buying clear breakouts, and I think for ETH last week, we got this clear breakout above this critical level of about 42.50. This was our previous high of our candle body close here. And since we got above it, we've just seen ETH, continue to climb. And it was doing this while Bitcoin, wasn't showing all that much strength. Obviously, over the last 48 hours, Bitcoin has had some positive price action, and it's encouraging to see that ETH has moved along with it as well. We sometimes can see a divergence in the performance of assets depending on where we're at in the market cycle. But when we get to the end of a market cycle, we typically see all these assets move in tandem. And what's unique about the end of a crypto market cycle is even if Bitcoin is remaining somewhat stagnant, like we saw last week, kind of bouncing between 64 and 60K, the alts can still run. So the alts really, they run when Bitcoin's stagnating or when Bitcoin's moving. So now I think looking to ETH, looking to the altcoins is a very favorable thing to do towards the end of this market cycle. And to that point, when we talk about ETH making new all-time highs, one thing that typically accompanies that is an increase in gas fees. And we saw that once again here, as soon as ETH broke into new all-time highs, gas fees shot up. So as a result, CJ and I published a trade insight for Avalanche on November 4th, 4 days ago here. And, basically we talked about this sort of flow of capital model where ETH makes new all-time highs. That brings up the gas fees and the network congestion. And that capital then begins to rotate into assets like Sol, HBAR, and AVAX. And like CJ pointed out, comparably to ETH and comparably to Bitcoin on that monthly chart, for AVAX, we had a clear breakout level here of about $81, which was at the time, right in conjunction with the previous all-time high. This for me was a clear breakout level, especially when you take a look at the volume profile. So we went ahead and published this trade insight with an entry of $81. And I want to quickly just talk about this stop loss here, or this exit of 98.5. So let's just look at AVAX real quick. It's made a very quick move over the last 48 hours here. So let's pull that up. And as you can see, it is just short of that exit target. And I don't think that you need to get greedy for that extra dollar here. When you see a move like this over the last 48 or even 72 hours, profit taking is natural, especially when you're approaching a psychological barrier of $100. When I made this trade insight, it was a rough estimate as for an exit. Typically when we approach these psychological barriers, you'll see some profit taking right before we get there. We're seeing that now. We topped at about 97.5. I think that still you could definitely take profit on this and have and not feel bad about it. Even though AVAX, I still believe is gonna climb much higher by end of market cycle. When you see a move like this over a 48-hour period, profit taking is a totally valid and I think intelligent move to make, especially when you consider that there are other assets that I'll talk about in a little bit when we get to our Doges of the day that sort of have yet to move and that could show better beta from your capital. So I think that whenever you have a move like this, consider taking profit, even if it's just short of the exit target. But
can I say one thing? Sorry,
yeah.
Can I say one thing about AVAX?
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. That would be the disciplined thing to do. Also, AVAX is on a TD sequential sell 9 on the 1 day. However, a lot of stocks that go to 90 typically will go to 100. A lot of stocks that go to 900 will typically go to 1,000. So already being at $96, we'll see if we get a pump end of day to go up to $100. But a lot of times that does happen, but still the disciplined move is to do basically what Monty just said. But just thought I'd put that input.
Yeah, no, you're completely right, CJ. I would not be surprised at all if this evening we saw AVAX continue to rip, especially when you consider ETH gas fees are still high and ETH speculation is still occurring. So technically, there are signs that we should be taking profit, but from a fundamental perspective, from a market timing perspective, and from what we've seen in the past, like you said there, I think that AVAX could definitely continue ripping. That being said, I did go ahead and take some profit this morning because I'm going to be looking to reallocate into some alts that I think have a good chance of making even higher returns in the month of November because they haven't had that move that AVAX saw over the last 48 hours here. So on that note, any Doges of the day that you guys will be looking to as we enter this week here?
Let me just throw one more thing out quick because it does kind of tie into Doge of the day as well. Obviously, all of us, the three of us, are focused on Bitcoin and Ethereum and the altcoins, of course. And these guys have made a great point, CJ and Monty, of pointing out when Bitcoin sort of hits that, glass ceiling, if you will, high glass node. But when they hit that glass ceiling and it stalls for a bit, you see a lot of that cash roll into these altcoins. CJ and Monty told you about that setup. Those of you who followed are already up a lot on that particular move as Bitcoin kind of hovered around that, low 60,000. Granted, it's back here to 65K plus now, but obviously the altcoins made a lot of money in the last, over the weekend and in the last week. I just wanted to point out quickly, guys, that we are approaching a 3 trillion market cap for the cryptos right now. We're at 2.86 trillion in total market cap of these 13,791 cryptos. I know it's crazy. But I wanted to really highlight that this has more than tripled this year. Beginning of this year, so the 1st of January, which was a Friday, we were $700 billion USD. Now we're 2.8. So we are 4x, nearly a full 4x on the year. And just to put another highlight on it, when we had that, meltdown of cryptos, which occurred more or less after Elon was the Saturday Night Live host, and I'm not putting it all on Elon. I'm just saying, obviously we did peak right as we were going into his little shtick on Saturday Night Live. We fell all the way from a 2.5 trillion valuation all the way back down to 1.1 trillion in market cap. And that's across all cryptos. So since then, of course, Bitcoin, which bottomed at, let's call it 29,000 on the lows, has been ripping to the upside, and it's back to 65,000. So you guys can do the math. It's up a little more than 120% since the lows that it hit in, what was that, June or July. Now, the market cap of all of crypto isn't 1.1, it's 2.8. So that's a pretty dramatic move as well. And a lot of that, of course, is coming from a lot of these altcoins. I mean, Binance, Avalanche, Solana, HBAR, all of these that have contributed, huge to this big surge that we're about to hit 3 trillion in market cap. The only negative at all, and this is not a big negative, but the only negative at all that I see, CJ and Monty, is that we keep getting more and more that crypto greed and fear index. We were 74 last week. We're back to 74 right now. That's on the higher end. It's not the highest it's been. I realize that, but the FOMO is catching a lot of people here. And that's why if you've got two wallets like me, you look at the one and you say, this is my HODL, and the other, you say, this is my trading wallet. Keep in mind that if it is a trading wallet and we get into those rarefied areas, you might want to pull a little off or do a little something, rotating around a little bit, just like CJ and Monty just described.
And to that point, CJ, you mentioned early on in the show that Bitcoin dominance was showing some interesting stuff, and that you wanted to perhaps mention that later. I think that ties in nicely with what Doc was talking about there. Anything you want to say about Bitcoin dominance before we dive into some Doges here?
Yeah. I traded out of Helium HNT into Bitcoin last night because of the Bitcoin dominance chart. And the interesting thing about the Bitcoin dominance chart is that you get the oscillators turning up. You can see that we're starting to have some bullish reaction momentum after an incredible altcoin season here, ever since Bitcoin has gotten above 60,000. But now we see Bitcoin starting to lead the charge. And I think that we are almost ready for another push into like the 65K, the 70K, and the 75K levels. I think if Bitcoin trends to those levels, it will strongly be led by an increase in Bitcoin dominance as well, coming off the back of this, what would have been a TD by 9, but it flipped one candle early. And then when you compare that with the total 2 market cap, or the total market cap of alts, we are a little bit overextended. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of profit taking in some of the alts and have that go back into Bitcoin. I think that we already are seeing that in the metaverse plays. We've had a lot of questions about the metaverse plays. Personally, I think that we're going to see a large correction in them, or continued correction before price can really rebound. And there's just so many new individuals who jumped in these assets like Sand, like Cube, like Engine. I think we really need to give that back to the market before those can really rally. Same thing is kind of true in HNT. You had that massive spike up during or following the announcement of their partnership with Dish on the 26th of October. I think that we're going to see profit taking now, and we're going to see a regression to probably some of these levels. So that money has got to go somewhere. And in my opinion, I think it's going to go into Bitcoin in the short term, as well as ETH. The interesting thing out of all of this price action, in my opinion, with Bitcoin dominance increasing, is that Ethereum continues to go up as well. So Ethereum is starting to become, I think, a bastion for some of that larger capital, the way that like Ethereum, or the way that like Bitcoin has been. So it's kind of interesting. And, that's the reason why I bought some Bitcoin yesterday.
Yeah, that's very interesting, CJ, especially when you consider the fact that, we've talked about some of these alts that have been going parabolic, even in the last 48 hours, like AVAX, making very strong moves. We typically don't see that when Bitcoin dominance is rising. You've referred to Bitcoin dominance in the past as sort of a volatility index. And when we see Bitcoin dominance rising, people tend to be going risk off, moving into the more stable Bitcoin, getting out of the alts. Now we're seeing something different. The alts are still performing very well. Like you pointed out, ETH is looking strong, even with a rising Bitcoin dominance. I think that speaks to the timing of our market cycle and the fact that, we're approaching the end of this market cycle where Bitcoin's going to lead the charge and bring a lot of these assets with it. So very, very exciting stuff there, CJ. And I just want to quickly talk about a Doge of the day that I'm going to be watching today. CJ, I think you did a great job talking about how many alts are a bit overextended right now. They've moved well beyond that 20-period SMMA, the smooth moving average. And, historically, when we see that, that does typically indicate that a pullback is imminent. CJ, we've talked about how, this 20-period moving average, smoothing average kind of acts like a magnet for price. Whenever we get too far extended, it tends to pull us back to it, sort of like gravity a little bit. And now, as you can see from Adam, this one has been sort of consolidating right above this 20-period smooth moving average for the last couple of weeks here, almost a month now. And I think that whenever you see an asset like Atom, which in August gained tremendous speculation on the back of Ethereum making new all-time highs, I think that there's strong support to the downside, high potential to the upside. We have some clear breakout levels here at about $45, $44. But that being said, I think if we get a nice bullish engulfing candle here and a continuation of this strong volume, I'll be looking to enter Cosmos here because, if you don't know what Cosmos does, it's kind of an interchain operability blockchain. And also, we talk about why people move away from ETH when it's making new all-time highs. Gas fees spike. Developers and speculators alike need to look elsewhere to, stop, not get destroyed by the gas fees. And you can do both of these things on Cosmos. Developers can develop. Retail traders can swap into lower cost assets, even ones on the Ethereum blockchain as well. So I think from a fundamental perspective and a technical one as well, Atom is looking strong here. So for those reasons, I'm picking it today as my Doge of the day.
Thank you, Monty.
We've sort of gone long today, so I'll just make it quick. Cardano, I already owned it. It's moving back up. I think it goes through 220 again to the upside. Volume's up about 25% in the last 24 hours. That's why I bought more over the weekend.
Yeah. Last one I'll finish with is Phantom FTM. Love this bullish engulfing candle. This goes with the same kind of thesis that Monty had with Atom, in the sense that you're looking for a more high throughput blockchain that developers are going to go to in competition with Ethereum because of the Ethereum gas fees. Also, you have such a nice pattern here where price comes down, you see the wicks, they touch the moving average, bounce from support, have buyers willing to step in at those levels, and now it looks like price is pushing past, or will likely push past, new all-time highs up to likely the 350 level. So that's one that I'm going to probably be trading. I haven't bought any yet, but I'm definitely going to be watching that one, and that will be my Doge of the day, Phantom. But thank you guys for watching. And, if you'd like to learn more about these trade insights, about critical levels, about the things that we look for, and ultimately go beyond just the Doge of the day, you can join us in our crypto community where we have education, a full-on charting platform, and a community live chat where you can discuss trading with Monty and myself 24/7, 365. You can try that for just $7 in the link below. At markrebellion.com/try crypto. So we really appreciate that, guys. And also thank you to Voyager as the sponsor of that show. Don't forget, you can get up to 9% interest on USDC and 12% interest on DOT. I believe they're doing 5.5% on Bitcoin right now and a similar amount on ETH. So a great place to really compound earnings in a bull market. But with that being said, I'll leave it with you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching today.
All right. Bang.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you again tomorrow, and take care.